On October 4th, 2023, Nintendo announced that online services for the 3DS and Wii U will be discontinued in early April 2024. This means that games and applications will no longer be able to use their online features, such as online multiplayer, with the sole exception of Pokémon Bank and Pokétransporter. With that being said though, the official Play Pokémon Twitter account has stated in a tweet, while Pokémon Bank can be used beyond that date, we encourage players to transfer their Pokémon to Pokémon Home at their earliest convenience. So a lot of people have taken this to mean that Pokémon Bank is closer to going away than not. If you ask me, I think it is way too early for Bank to go down because there are so many things that will be locked away from completionists if we lose the forward compatibility with the older games. That's why I made this video to tell you everything that will be lost without Pokémon Bank. Now, before we start, a couple quick disclaimers. First, for the purposes of this video, I will be ignoring Pokémon Go. Yes, technically you can get every Pokémon locked to pre-Switch games in Home by transferring from Go. But the fact that some of these Pokémon are locked to certain continents leads me to think that Go is probably not going to be a viable option for most people. So from this point on, I will not be mentioning Pokémon Go at all. Second, as of the upload of this video, the Indigo Disc DLC has not been released yet. However, through trailers and other means, we do know the full list of returning Pokémon in the Indigo Disc. So I'm gonna put a light spoiler warning. I'm not covering any of the leaks or rumors about new stuff in the DLC, just returning Pokémon. And third, I'm moving forward under the presumption that you have a 3DS with Pokémon Bank, Pokétransporter, and Pokémon Crystal Virtual Console already installed. You can't legitimately download these anymore without the eShop, but of course, if you want to, there is always another way. So with that out of the way, let's start with the actual Pokémon species that are not currently obtainable on any of the Switch games. These species must be transferred from Pokémon Bank to register them in Home's Pokédex. Any Pokémon that we know will be returning in the Indigo Disc will be marked with a blue star next to their name. Thanks to Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus, all 493 Pokémon from Gens 1 through 4 are obtainable on the Switch, except for 2, Celebi and Deoxys. We'll start with Celebi, who can be obtained in the Pokémon Crystal Virtual Console on the 3DS. You get 1 Celebi per save file, so if you catch Celebi and transport it to Bank, you can then reset your file and catch as many Celebis as you want, making this a repeatable method. I think it's also important to mention that this Celebi is not shiny locked. It has a pre-Gen 6 full odds chance of being shiny, 1 in 8,192. Moving on, next is Deoxys. Deoxys can be obtained at the end of the Delta episode in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. This method is repeatable in the same way as Celebi in that you get 1 per save file. If you're like me, you might be playing through Auras quite a few times. This is because Deoxys has 4 different boxable forms. So if you're going for complete living form decks, you'll need to have at least 4 Deoxys deposited into Home. Deoxys' forms can be changed in BDSP though, so don't worry about having to get all the forms before transferring them from Bank to Home. So with those 2 done, we can move on to Generation 5. There are a whopping 19 Gen 5 Pokemon that are not currently obtainable on any Switch games. They are Snivy, Servine, Superior, Tepig, Pignite, Emboar, Pansage, Simisage, Pansear, Simisear, Panpour, Simipour, Patrat, Watchog, Blitzel, and Zebstrika. There are also 3 mythical Pokemon that are not obtainable in any Switch games, Victini, Meloetta, and Genesect. These guys are a bit of a special case though, and I will go over that. I'll lead off this section by saying Black and White 1 are easily the quickest way to grab a Pokemon in each of these lines. Over a few reset save files, you can get 1 of each of the starters, 1 of each of the monkeys, a couple Patrat, and a couple Blitzel, all before getting the second badge. Transport all these guys to Bank and take them out in a 3DS game where you can breed and evolve where necessary, and you're done with Gen 5. If you don't have any copies of Black or White, don't worry, you're not out of luck yet. Island Scan is a feature of the Alola games that allows you to encounter Pokemon not native to the region. The species you find will differ depending on the day and which island you use your scan on. In Base Sun and Moon only, you can use Island Scan on Pony Island to catch Superior on Thursdays and Emboar on Saturdays. Alternatively, the Unova starters can also be obtained in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. After completing the Delta episode by finishing the Deoxys fight, you wake up back in Little Root Town. Exiting through the north to Route 101, you'll trigger a cutscene where Professor Birch is being chased by a Machoke. He'll tell you to take a Pokemon from the briefcase where you get the choice of one of the Unova starters. If you're playing through Auras multiple times anyway for all the Deoxys forms, this is by far the best way to get the Unova starters since you really don't have to do any extra work for them. Once you finish the Delta episode, you also unlock the Battle Resort, which is one of the best daycares for egg farming in the whole series. Next up is Patrat, Watchog, and the Elemental Monkeys. For these guys, we're going to look at X and Y. In fact, we have to look at X and Y because these were the most recent games you could catch any of these Pokemon in. You haven't been able to catch a Pansage in the mainline series for 10 years. Anyway, all 3 of the monkeys can be found in the Santaloon Forest super early in the game. Here, they all have a 10% encounter rate in the grass. There's also a shop in Lumiose City that sells the evolution stones that you need to evolve all of them. To catch Watchog, you'll need to progress quite a bit further into the game up to Route 15. Here, Watchog has a 10% encounter rate in the grass and a 30% encounter rate in the red flower patches. The only way to get Patrat in Gen 6 is by breeding a Watchog, but by then you'll have access to the daycare anyway. The last Gen 5 Pokemon are Blitzel and Zebstrika. So Zebstrika can be obtained in X and Y through the Friend Safari. However, due to the mechanics of the Friend Safari, the odds of finding someone who has Zebstrika in their Safari and also meets the conditions to unlock the 3rd slot these days, I'm guessing is really low. So yes, Zebstrika is technically obtainable in X and Y, but I'm just going to move on to Oraz, where things are honestly not that much better. Once you unlock the ability to soar with Latios or Latios by progressing far enough in the story, you can start to find Mirage spots. The game randomly selects from a pool of 28 different maps. Of those 28 maps, Zebstrika can be encountered on 5 of them. So that's about a 17.9% chance every 24 hours. Frankly, my advice would be, unless you have black or white, I would just wait until the DLC for this guy. Now, as for those 3 mythicals, there is actually a way to get these guys. Through the use of some internet trickery, you can connect to custom servers that host the Gen 5 distribution events. I won't go too in depth over how it works, mostly because I don't really understand it myself, but just know that through this method, you can obtain Victini, Meloetta, and Genesect with any copy of a Gen 5 game. I'll leave a link in the description to a full guide for this exploit. For Gen 6, there is but one singular Pokemon that is not obtainable in any Switch game, and that is Furfrou. And technically these guys, and also technically these guys. But I'm gonna hold off on the mythicals for now, so let's talk about the starters first. Of course, being starters, you can just play through the beginning of X and Y a few times and bring them into Scarlet and Violet to breed for more, or alternatively, in the Ultra games, you can use Island Scan. Funny enough, they actually replaced the slots that the Unova starters had in the base games. So on Pony Island, Chestnut can be caught on Thursdays, Greninja on Fridays, and Delphox on Saturdays. So with those done, we can talk about Furfrou. In X and Y, Furfrou is only found on Route 5. It has a 20% encounter rate in the grass and a 10% encounter rate in the purple flower patches. You can also find it in the Ultra games. It has a 10% encounter rate on Route 2 in the grass patches closest to the southern exit of the route. Gen 7 is the last generation for this topic and has 9 Pokemon not on the Switch. Pikipek, Trumbeak, Toucanon, Minior, Magearna, Zeraora, Marshadow, and I'm going to throw in Pikachu with Hat and Battlebond Greninja. Starting with the Pikipek line, Pikipek itself can be found on the first route of all the Alola games, so getting it should be no trouble. Trumbeak can be caught as early as Route 5, but also appears on Routes 8 and 11, the Lush Jungle, the Pony Grove, and the Pony Plains. In the base games, Toucanon can only be obtained by evolving Trumbeak at level 28. In the Ultra games, Toucanon can be called into an SOS battle by a wild Trumbeak found on Route 11, the Pony Grove, and the Pony Plains, but it's probably still easier to just evolve one. Minior can only be found on Mount Hakulani on Ula Ula Island. You're going to want to stick to the patch of grass closest to the top of the mountain, as this gives you the best odds of encountering it across all the Alola games. Minior has 7 different boxable forms, so keep that in mind if you're going for a living form dex. Next, I'm going to talk about the QR code Pokemon, Magearna and Pikachu with Hat. These Pokemon are obtained by scanning special QR codes using the 3DS camera inside the game. Aside from the unorthodox method of obtaining these Pokemon, they're essentially treated the same as any other static encounter in the past games. You get 1 per save file, and you can reset as many save files as you want to get more. This is also the case for the Battlebond Greninja, rewarded for completing the Sun and Moon demo. It can be transferred once per each unique save file. And that finally brings us to the remaining mythicals, Diancie, Hoopa, Volcanion, Marshadow, and Zeraora. Unlike the Gen 5 mythicals, there's unfortunately no tricks you can pull to bring these guys into your game. The only way to get these 5 is straight up through hacking. I'm not going to play the moral compass here, it's really your own decision on how you want to go about this. I will say though, if you are considering this option, do it now on the 3DS while you still can. The 3DS is extremely easy to get into if you want, and in the future, I think getting these Pokemon outside of their distribution windows is only going to get harder and riskier. And with that, we have covered all 37 Pokemon in special forms not obtainable in any Switch games at this time. But there's still more to go over. The Pokemon Home mobile app has other dexes you can fill out as well. The app has complete lists of almost every single move and ability in the series. When you deposit a Pokemon into Home, it checks what moves and what ability they currently have and will register them in the appropriate dexes. This is denoted by a gray circle turning into a Pokeball. Unfortunately, as many people know, Dexit didn't just cut out Pokemon, it cut out a lot of moves as well. I've decided to break this next segment into 2 parts. In total, there are 72 moves not available between generations 8 or 9 at this moment. However, 24 of these moves are available in the Let's Go games. I know these games were some of the less popular ones with fans, and a lot of people may have skipped out on them. So the first 24 moves on this list are available on the Switch and won't be lost when Bank shuts down, but some might prefer to get them on the 3DS while you still can. Going alphabetically starts us out with Barrage. This move is exclusive to the Execute line, who all learn it at level 1. Barrier is a move learned by a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon. I'd recommend you pick up a Tentacool, as he can learn a few moves later on the list as well. Bide is a move learned by a ton of Pokemon at low levels. Finding it in the wild should be no problem. Bone Club is a move exclusive to the Cubone line. They're able to learn it multiple times at low levels. Clamp is an interesting move, as it can be learned by Shellder, but not Cloyster in most games. Clamper on the Binnacle line learn this move at low levels as well. Comet Punch is a fairly rare move, but it is learned by some common Pokemon at lower levels. Constrict is a common move learned by a bunch of Pokemon at really low levels. Tentacool is probably going to be the easiest and fastest one to get. Dizzy Punch is a bit of a rare move. A Spinda from Oraz or a Crabrawler from an Alola game will probably be the easiest way to grab this one. Double Slap is another common move learned by a ton of Pokemon at lower levels, so plenty of options here. Dragon Rage is a pretty iconic move learned by a lot of dragon types. Who would have thought? Depending on what game you're playing, it's really up to you who you want to shoot for. Personally, I would pick up a Charmander in X and Y or a Salandit in Sun and Moon. Both of these guys will be able to learn some moves later on the list as well. Egg Bomb is a move learned only by the Executor forms and the Chansey line, excluding Happiny. Executor does learn this move earlier though. Hyper Fang is a move learned by a lot of early game Pokemon. The Rattata and Bidoof lines will learn it earlier than others. Jump Kick is a bit of an oddball move. I'd say it's up to you on what you want to go for. Karate Chop is a move learned by pretty common fighting types. I'd go for the Machop or Pancham line. Meditate is a move learned by a couple of psychic and fighting type lines at low levels. Another one I'd say it's up to you on what you want to go for. Mirror Move is learned by mostly flying types at mid to higher levels in the pre-Let's Go games. Chatot learns this move earliest at level 9, but the Spearow line also learns it fairly early and is a lot more common. Psywave is a common move learned by a bunch of psychic types at low levels and shouldn't be too hard to find. Rage is another super common move learned by a boatload of Pokemon at low levels. Again, shouldn't be too hard to find. Razor Wind is learned by quite a few Pokemon at mid-levels. Notably, a lot of Gen 6 Pokemon were given this move in their learn set, so I would look to X and Y for this one. Rolling Kick is a weirdly rare move learned only by 3 Pokemon, one of which is a mythical who I'm going to ignore. Hitmontop can be taught this move with a Heart Scale, and in Gen 7 only, it learns it on Evolution. Hitmonlee also learns this move through a Heart Scale. Sharpen is another pretty rare move learned by a few oddball Pokemon at lower levels. Sonic Boom is a somewhat common move learned at lower levels. The Magnemite or Voltorb lines are the obvious picks here. Spike Cannon is a move with a bit of an odd distribution. Cloyster learns it earliest, but Corsola and the Mareanie line are also fair options. Twin Needle is another weirdly rare move only learned by 2 Pokemon up until the Let's Go games. I think Beedrill is the obvious choice here based on how common it is. With those 24 moves done, we're moving on to the remaining 48 moves that are solely stuck to pre-Switch games. These are the ones that when Bank goes down, there will be no way to register them on your own anymore. You'll just have to hope that these get added back in future games. Going alphabetically again, first up is Assist. This is a pretty rare move only learned by 3 Pokemon lines. The Purloin line learns the move earliest. Beak Blast is a move exclusive to Toucanon. It learns the move automatically on Evolution. Toucanon is known to be coming back in the Indigo Disc, but there's no guarantee that Beak Blast will return as well. Bestow is a somewhat rare move learned at early to mid levels. I would go for Clefairy, or if you're playing Oraz, catch a Zigzagoon early on. Camouflage is another somewhat rare move with an odd distribution. Again, if you're playing Oraz, you can catch the Kecleon encountered in the story, or just a Staryu works as well. Captivate is a move with a very wide distribution, but it tends to be learned at mid to higher levels. Chip Away is another move with a pretty wide distribution, and this one is learned at lower to mid levels. I will add that Snorlax learns Chip Away at level 17 in Gen 6, and the static encounter in Route 7 in X and Y is level 15. Embargo is learned by a wide variety of dark and psychic types at low to mid levels. The Sandile and Gothita lines learn the move earlier on. Feint Attack is another move that a ton of common Pokemon learn at low levels. Not much else to say on this one. Flame Burst is learned by a bunch of fire types at low to mid levels. A Numble from Oraz is a good choice, but if you're going for a Charmander or a Salandit to register Dragon Rage, they both conveniently also learn Flame Burst at later levels. Foresight is yet another low-level move learned by a wide pool of Pokemon. I'd recommend the Machop line so you can register Karate Chop at the same time. Frustration is a move learned only by Baniri on level up, but it is available as a TM in Gens 2 through 7 and can be learned by almost every single Pokemon. Grass Whistle is a fairly rare move learned at low levels by a few grass-type lines. The Sunken Line or Roselia are what I would go for, just remember that only Roselia learns Grass Whistle. Heal Block has a pretty wide pool of Pokemon that can learn it, with the Baltoy and Elgyem lines learning it the earliest. Heal Order is one of the 3 signature moves of Vespiquen. When Vespiquen returned for generations 8 and 9, they brought back Attack Order and Defend Order, but for whatever reason left Heal Order behind. This one can be tricky as Wild Vespiquen can only be caught in Gen 5, in Rustling Grass on Route 12, or for the sequels Route 12 and the Lostlorn Forest. Gens 4 and 6 will have to catch a female Combi and evolve it. Heart Stamp is pretty rare, only learned by 3 Pokemon lines. Woobat is probably your best option here. Ion Deluge is another odd and rare move, either being learned at level 1 or some crazy high level. I'll leave it up to you on how you want to go about this one. Lucky Chant, on the other hand, has a fairly wide distribution. I'd recommend you grab a Flabébé at the beginning of X and Y who learns it very early. Going back to the oddly rare moves, we have Magnet Bomb. Only 3 Pokemon lines learn this move. I think Magnemite is the obvious choice here, especially if you need to register Sonic Boom as well. Magnitude is available on a couple of really common ground types. I would recommend the Cantonian Geodude line since they will also be helpful in getting another move coming up soon. Me First is a decently widespread move that unfortunately is mostly learned at mid to high levels. Using a heart scale on a female Meowstic could be a faster option. Miracle Eye is a somewhat rare move usually learned at mid levels. However, the Elgyem line learns it very early. This works out well if you also need to register Heal Block. Mirror Shot is another somewhat rare move, but thankfully our good friend Magnemite has our back because he can learn this move pretty early. Mudsport is a move found on plenty of ground types, and also the reason I recommended Cantonian Geodude earlier as he learns it very early. Natural Gift has a wide pool of Pokemon that can learn it. I think Lotad is the best choice here since he learns it early on and is pretty common. Needle Arm is another move only learned by 3 Pokemon lines. Maractus is probably the easiest way to get this move, but if you're playing through X and Y again, choosing Chespin at the start will make getting this move pretty free. Nightmare is a pretty strange move. It has a pretty shallow pool of Pokemon that can learn it by level up, but the levels they learn it at are all over the place. Personally, I would just go for a heart scale on Hypno. Nightmare is also a TM in Gen 2 Virtual Console, which does open up the pool quite a lot if you want to do that. Odor Sleuth has a wide distribution across a lot of common Pokemon. Woobat learns this move really early if you need to register Heart Stamp as well. Powder is another interesting case where it can only be learned by Vivillon at level 1 or level 55. And while Vivillon did return in Scarlet and Violet, Powder did not. Psycho Boost is the signature move of Deoxys. If you have a Deoxys in home, it is possible to teach it Psycho Boost in BDSP. So the move is technically obtainable on the Switch, but the Pokemon that learns it is not, so I figured I'd include it on this list anyway. I guess I'll also mention that if you purified the Shadow Lugia in XD Gale of Darkness, it will also know Psycho Boost if for some reason you'd rather register it that way. I will admit that would be cool though. Pursuit is a pretty iconic move learned by a ton of Pokemon at lower levels. I would guess that the Rattata or Spearow lines are going to be the fastest way to register this, and they can also learn moves mentioned earlier. Refresh is a move with decent distribution. I'd go for either Eevee or Swablu depending on what game you're playing. Return, like Frustration, is only learned naturally by 1 Pokemon, Lopunny. However, as a TM, it can be taught to almost every single Pokemon. Rototiller is a fairly rare move that most need a heart scale to learn, but Mudbray from Alola learned this move early on as well. Secret Power is another one of those moves primarily learned by TM, with only Audino learning it through Level Up. Orez are the only 3DS games where Secret Power is a TM, and this is where I would recommend getting it, as the TM is given to you for free during the story. Signal Beam has a decently wide distribution, usually learned at mid-levels. This is another one I'll leave up to you. Skydrop has a really weird distribution. It's only naturally learned by 3 Pokemon lines at pretty high levels. It's also available as a TM in Gens 5 through 7, but this is also a pretty exclusive list made up mostly of legendaries. If it were up to me, I would take the Charmander in X and Y, load it up with Dragon Rage and Flame Burst, then as a Charizard, teach it Skydrop from the TM you get in the post-game, which will knock out 3 moves with 1 Pokemon. Sky Uppercut is a move most closely associated with Blaziken or Breloom, but there are a few other lines that learn it as well. Notably, Hakamoa learns the move automatically on evolution. Smelling Salts is a weird niche move exclusive to the Makuhita line. They're available in all 3DS games though, so finding one shouldn't be too challenging. Snatch is a move learned naturally by a few lines, but can also be taught via Move Tutor in Orez and the Ultra games to a huge pool of Pokemon. Personally though, I would just catch a Solosis in X and Y since that line learns it very early. Spiderweb is a move with a very small distribution, but all these Pokemon are pretty common, so in theory, actually getting the move shouldn't be too hard. Spotlight is another move with a very small distribution, and on top of that is only available in the Alola games. Unless you plan to play through the game with a Morlul, a heart scale is probably the way to go. Steamroller is yet another pretty exclusive move. I imagine most people are going to go with the Venipede line. Synchronoise has a decently sized pool of Pokemon that can learn it. However, most of them learn it at higher levels. Munna learns the move the earliest, and you may want to consider picking one up for the next move as well. Telekinesis is a pretty rare move. While Munna does learn this move by level up, you may prefer to get Kadabra instead. Trump Card is another rare move learned naturally by just 4 Pokemon at pretty high levels. Eevee or Minun are going to be your best bets here. Wake Up Slap has a large pool of Pokemon that can learn it at a wide range of levels. The Machop and Makuhita lines are good options as they've already been highlighted for previous moves on this list. Water Sport is a super common move learned by tons of water types at early levels. And finally, the very last move on the list, Ring Out. Ring Out has a pretty wide distribution of Pokemon that learn it at later levels. We're going to go full circle and highlight Tentacool once again for his ability to learn this move, Barrier, and Constrict. And would you believe that we're still not done? Don't worry though, the ability segment is way shorter. I'm going to start by mentioning abilities exclusive to Mega Pokemon. Aerolate, Parental Bond, Primordial Sea, Desolate Land, and Delta Stream are all automatically registered in Home if you deposit the pre-Mega or Primal form of the necessary Pokemon. For example, if you catch Rayquaza in the Crown Tundra and deposit him into Home, Mega Rayquaza and Delta Stream are automatically registered in your dexes. So these abilities are not locked behind Bank, despite most of these forms not being available on the Switch. Similarly, Neuroforce, the signature ability of Ultra Necrozma, can be registered in Home by depositing any Necrozma as well as any Solgaleo or Lunala. You can also register the Dawn Wings and Dusk main forms this way. With that knocked out, I'm again going to first go over the abilities that can be obtained in the Let's Go games, but not in Gens 8 and 9. Galvanize is an ability exclusive to the Alolan Geodude line. Alolan Geodude can be traded for in Vermilion City with an NPC. Galvanize is this line's hidden ability though, so you'll have to bring one up to Scarlet and Violet and use an ability patch. Surge Surfer is the signature ability of Alolan Raichu. Alolan Raichu can be traded for in Saffron City. Tangling Hair is an ability exclusive to the Alolan Diglett line, who can be traded for in Lavender Town. Power of Alchemy is an ability exclusive to the Alolan Grimer line. Alolan Grimer can be traded for on Cinnabar Island in Let's Go Pikachu only. Like Galvanize, this is a hidden ability, so bring one up to Scarlet and Violet and use an ability patch. On the opposite side, on Cinnabar Island in Let's Go Eevee only, you can trade for Alolan Meowth. Alolan Persian can have the ability Fur Coat, and while this isn't an exclusive ability, the only other Pokemon that can have it is Furfrou, who at this moment is still locked behind Bank. So those are the 5 abilities that are obtainable on the Switch, but you may prefer to get them in the Alola games instead. As for abilities that are not obtainable in any Switch games, there are just 4. Victory Star is the signature ability of Victini. Victini is technically available to get through the DNS exploit in the Gen 5 games. Shields Down is the signature ability of Minior. Minior should be coming back in the Indigo Disc, so this ability won't be locked away for much longer. Battle Bond is an ability unique to certain Greninjas. The only way to get Battle Bond as of right now and for the immediate future is through the Sun and Moon demo, as I discussed earlier in this video. And finally, Soul Heart is the signature ability of Magearna, who I also discussed earlier. So that's it for the abilities. There are really only 4, soon to be 3 abilities that are stuck behind Bank. And that's where I'm gonna cap off this video for now. There's still a little more that could be talked about, namely the challenges tab in the mobile app, where some require you to transfer certain Pokemon from older titles, but you can easily access that information by opening the mobile app yourself. There's not much that me rambling for 10 more minutes is going to add. Fair warning, some of them are really dumb. As of the day I'm recording this, we also have an official release date for the Indigo disc. Once that comes out and we get an idea of everything that's included in it, I'll post an updated version of this video that'll be a little bit cleaner. I just wanted to get this one up now in order to give people as much time as possible to prepare and gather what they need before Bank sadly dies. If there is anything at all that you think I missed, comment down below or reach out to me on Twitter and I'll be sure to add it in the updated video. Other than that, thanks for sticking around to the end. Check out my other stuff if you want. And yeah, bye!